Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss Rigvedic period, the period between 1500 BC to 1000 BC, roughly 500 periods. We will try to understand in today's lecture the society, economy and polity of this 500 years, and we will try to understand major characteristic, because we are not going to discuss everything, but the major characteristic which manifested in different way we will try to infer from there. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in studio Dr. O.P. Singh. He is a senior academician and presently teaches history in Delhi College of Arts and Commerce in Delhi University. He is associate professor there, and his area of specialization is ancient Indian history. So I think his knowledge and experience will help us and give a kind of insight of society, economy and polity of Rigvedic period. So on your behalf, I welcome him for EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amrendraji. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, viewers. As Amrendraji suggested, today's lecture is on Rigvedic age, and the chronology for the same is 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Now, for these 500 years, we shall try to understand the basic features, the characteristic features of the economy, society and polity of the Rigvedic period. Now, as far as this period is concerned, we have mainly literary source for this period, and that is Rigveda. Though there are a few sporadic archaeological remains as well in some of the regions, but they are not as significant as the period requires to be. But Rigveda is the main source for the history reconstruction of history of this period, and our conclusions, our assertions are based mostly on the basis of the informations obtained from the Rigveda. Now, to start with economy, if we look at the economic structure of Rigvedic period, Rigvedic economy was basically pastoral in nature. Now, this is evident from direct reference of cattle in the 6 mandalas, which are the original mandalas of the Rigvedic period of the Rigveda. And in these mandalas, what we find that there are frequent prayers for pasu, which included goat, sheep, horses and man apart from cattle. Now, amongst these cattle, go or cow was the most important wealth of the Rigvedic people. Now, importance of cow can be seen in the fact that almost all aspects of life of the Rigvedic people revolved around this word. For example, a wealthy person was called a gomat. The word for battles, which was a very common feature of Rigvedic Aryans, is Gavishti or Gaveshana. The chief of the Rigvedic people was known as Gomat. They called their daughters, even their relations were based on this word, they called their daughters Duhitri, that is one who milks the cow. So there are so many references in the day-to-day language of the Aryans which suggest that their life in fact revolved around cow or go, as the prefix can be seen in most of the words. Now, due to importance of cattle, the pastured land became very important. This land was under the communal control. There was no private ownership of land, and there was no such importance of agriculture during Rigvedic times, and cow being the most important wealth, their economy revolved around cow and cattle. So the pastured land was the most important land for them, most important property for them, but it was under the communal control. That is, entire community, the entire tribe had or enjoyed control over the land which was the pastured land. Now, it is also emphasized from the fact that cattle obtained in battles were basically distributed through assemblies, such as these assemblies were Ganas or Vidatha, but all the members of the society did not have an equal share to such animals. Now what happened that the leaders and their closest supporters apart from the priests, they obtained a larger share than other. So there can be seen an equality in access to the cattle wealth, and this is discerned from the this is wealth inequality in cattle wealth, and king, the Rajan and the priest acquired a larger share, a greater control over wealth as compared to the masses or viz. Now this process of differentiation that had started during Rigvedic times as far as control over wealth is concerned, here in the terms of cattle wealth, this process further accentuated in the time to come. Now, so the main economic activity of Rigvedic Aryans was cattle rearing, but at the same time some amount of agriculture was also conducted. The evidence of agriculture is very limited because land or grain do not figure as an item of dispute, nor land is mentioned as an item of gift. There are no prayers to obtain land, nor the chiefs are expected to protect it, because the chiefs are called Gomat. So the chiefs are expected to protect the wealth of the people, and that was cow. They are not expected to protect the land, which is seen in later times, later Vedic times or post Vedic times. Now, as far as agriculture is concerned, as we said, there is very limited information related to agriculture. Now, the only grain that is referred in the Rig Veda is Yava, Y-A-V-A, Yava. So there is some confusion about the interpretation of this particular term, because according to certain scholars, it was a group of grains, while some others suggest that this Yava is basically barley and not a group of grain. It is a particular grain, and that is barley. Now, it is more likely that it was barley, because barley is a grain that ripens in as little as 60 days, and it could serve as food for the humans and fodder for the animal. And it is suited to the semi-nomadic life of the Aryans. So in all probability, the Yava mentioned in the Rig Veda was barley, and probably barley was the only grain that was grown by the Rigvedic Aryans. Now, as far as control over this agricultural land is concerned, individual control is not known. There was probably no individual ownership of land. Now, as far as details regarding the organization of agricultural production is concerned, we again do not have much information because of the paucity of sources, because we have only Rig Veda to discuss on the issue, and Rig Veda being primarily a religious text, does not provide all the details regarding organization of agricultural production. It is likely that probably Vish or the common people were engaged in the actual process of production on common land. Now, as far as Rajanyas and Purohitas or priests are concerned, they participated very less actively, but they acquired a larger share in the produce of these voluntary gifts. There is some evidence to suggest that Vedic people learned the knowledge of agriculture from the local people, from the indigenous population, because there is a term in the Rig Veda for plowshare, it's langal. Langal is basically a term of Munda origin, which does not find any equivalent in any of the Indo-European languages. So it is believed that probably they learned the art of agriculture from the local population. Similarly, the words for cattle are common in Indo-European language, but those for cereals are different. Now, this again suggests that these terms were basically borrowed from the local vocabulary, from the local language, and this again reasserts the assumption that probably the Aryans learned the art of agriculture from the local population. Now, as far as references of crafts are concerned, they are relatively very sparse in the Rig Veda. There are groups which are mentioned and which suggest that some amount of art and craft was being practiced. These are groups like leather workers or charmakar, chariot makers or rathakar, and even potters. But these people were not considered to be of low status. Now, as far as metal is concerned or use of metal is concerned, the issue has been a subject of controversy in the Rigvedic times. Because there is a term in the Rig Veda which is called ayas. It is generally taken to mean as copper or bronze, but it is occasionally interpreted as iron also, because archaeologically speaking there are sporadic evidence which suggests that by the end of Rigvedic times probably the use of iron had started. But in any case, the use of metal tools was very limited in Rigvedic period, and in fact it remained so during later Vedic period as well. Now, in case of pottery, the evidence of amalgamation of local tradition is also visible, just like agriculture, because just as in the case of agriculture we have a term borrowed from local Munda language, here also pottery is also influenced, rather pottery also seems to be influenced by the local language, because the term for the potter, which is kulal, has no parallel in other Indo-European languages. Apart from it, weaving was another important occupation that was being performed during Rigvedic times, and this was probably under the control of the women within the household, and it is suggested that weaving was completely under the control of women only. Now, as far as weaving is concerned, it is likely that the women used wool obtained from sheep, and this was possibly the only raw material, because we have no reference of cotton in the Rig Veda. So, women obtained the wool from the sheep that was kept by the Aryans, and they weaved various cloths or necessary items with the help of this raw material. Now, as far as market oriented economy is concerned, there is almost no evidence or very little evidence, but other means of exchange and redistribution were significant, because such exchanges were operating at different levels. Now, there is some evidence to suggest that, rather some scholars have suggested that the Aryans, Rigvedic Aryans, were using coins, and they talk about a particular term niska, which is there in the Rig Veda, and some have tried to interpret it in the terms of money economy, but it has not been established so far, it has not been accepted so far, because no archaeological remains of any coin or money economy has been obtained from the Rigvedic times. Now, as far as exchange is concerned, as I said, it operated at different levels, and one among these was loptri. Loptri was basically war booty, because whenever one tribe attacked over another tribe, it looted the wealth of another tribe, and this was called as loptri. So, it was basically redistributed amongst the people who had won it or who had brought it. Now, apart from cattle, this loptri included horses and women slave as well. Now, as far as importance of distribution is concerned, it is indicated by frequent use of the terms ans or bhag in the Rigveda, because these two terms occur very frequently in the Rigveda, and it is suggested that this distribution or redistribution was a very important aspect of the life of Rigvedic people. Then there are evidence to suggest that the chief was associated with acquiring of this slope tree was also associated with its redistribution, as this redistribution was performed by some Vedic assemblies known as Vidath and Gana. Now, chief gave gifts to the members of Vish. He gifted to priests as well, and thus in this way he earned the constant support of both the groups for his political survival and for his legitimacy. However, there was not equal sharing of this slope tree in this redistribution, and there was disparity between the people owning wealth, but this disparity was not very huge. The gap between the rich and poor was not huge, it was less. Then chief also acquired wealth through voluntary offering by the tribesmen, which was called Bali. This Bali was basically offered by his tribesmen or the Vish and subjected people. Now, Vish probably offered Bali basically to please the Rajan, and in later literatures Bali becomes a tax, but as far as Rigvedic period is concerned, Bali was basically a voluntary offering which was offered by the people of the tribe to his chief on their own. It was not forced. However, there are certain instances to suggest that in fact some forced Bali was also taken from the subjugated tribes. So probably hostile tribes were forced to pay this Bali. Now this Bali included cattle, dairy produce and grain. Now a part of it was spent on sacrifice, some was used in communal feasts, some was distributed to priests as dana dakshina, and rest was left with the Rajan. Then there are certain other issues that seem to have emerged during Rigvedic times, because it is suggested that spoked hill was probably introduced during Rigvedic times only. Especially the Aryans were very mobile people, and they used chariots or rathas to move from one place to another. So there are references in the Rig Veda such as Ara and Nabhya to suggest the use of spoked wheels. However, archaeological evidence is very poor in this regard. Now, moving from economy to society of the Rigvedic times, what we find that the social organization of the Rigvedic people was essentially tribal, because it was very simple economy. So naturally the simple economy of Rigveda is basically also reflected in the nature of the society, which was very simple. It is suggested that in many respects the Rigvedic society was an egalitarian society, though there were differences existed in terms of rank and wealth, but there were no restrictions over the possession of productive resources. Everybody enjoyed control over the productive resources. Now, the patriarchal family was the basic social unit. It was the basic social unit. It was a fairly large unit, as 3 to 4 generations, including both parents of husband and wife, lived together. Now, it was the basic unit of production and consumption. It was called kul, Kula, kul, and the kinship terminology was very simple, as we have distinct terms only for father, mother, brother, sister, son and daughter. Now, apart from it, all the relatives including nephews, grandchildren and cousins were referred as naptri. Now, a larger unit than kul or family was the vis, which may mean a clan. Now, its importance can be seen from the fact that it has been mentioned for 171 times in the Rigveda. Now, another unit was jan, which is referred for 275 times in the Rigveda. Now, the exact relationship between the jan and vis is not known, but it is suggested that probably jan included the vis. Now, as far as Rigvedic period is concerned, the people were semi-nomadic people, so they did not settle at one place, but when during course of time, during later Vedic times and post-Vedic times, when the people settled down and agriculture developed and when agriculture became their main occupation, they were known as Janapadas, and various Janapadas were named after dominant kings or lineages. Now, as far as the fourfold Varna structure is concerned, it was absent during Rigvedic times, because though there is a reference of the four Varnas in the Rigveda itself, but it comes from the 10th mandala, which is a composition of later Vedic times, so it can be safely assumed that the Rigvedic society was not based on the basis of Varna. Rather, the society was divided on occupational basis, in which there were three social groups. These were Purohit, Rajan and Vis. Purohit was the priestly class, Rajan was the chief and Vis was the common people. Now, as far as the structure of the society is concerned, it was simple and it was not rigid. There was scope of mobility in the society, because we have references in the Rigveda where it is suggested that members of one family could adopt to various professions. For example, there is a reference in which the son is a musician, the father is a physician and the mother grinds corn in others' houses. So, it can be said that the Rigvedic society was based on occupation and not based on the basis of Varna. Now, as far as status of women is concerned, it has been a matter of debate, because generally there is a tendency to idolize women, but the reality seems to be more complex, because on the one hand we have political participation of women in some of the tribal committees like Sabha and Vidat. Then we also have references in which it is suggested that women played very important part in the production process, like they were involved in weaving, they performed milking of the cows, as it is obvious from the term Duhitri. Then there are references of women accompanying, women composing Rigvedic hymns, and it also indicates their access to the literary tradition or ritual tradition. Now, we have also references that the practice of child marriage was absent. So, there are so many instances or references to suggest that women enjoyed a better status, a better position in the society. They were controlling some of the economic activities, they were having access to the ritual tradition, they were part of the political structure, political setup at the same time. But what is important is that the society was organized patrilineally. So, marriage as a custom had established, and it was being practiced largely, but we also have some references of incestuous relationships. Apart from, there are evidence of what you call polygamy, that is one man having more than one wives. We have evidence of polyandry, that is one wife having more than one husband, and we have also evidence of levirate, it's called niyoga in the Rigveda, whereby a woman was supposed to establish physical relationship with the younger brother of her husband till a male child is born. Rather, a widow, not a woman, a widow was supposed to establish physical contact with the younger brother of husband till a male child is born. Now, this term has been interpreted by some scholars as widow remarriage as well, but in fact it was not widow remarriage, it was a different practice which is called levirate. So, what is important is that on the one hand there is tendency to idolize women, but on the other hand what we find that in the Rigveda itself there are prayers for birth of sons, Sur Veer Putra they wanted, so that they could go into wars and they fight and they bring more and more loptri. So, sons were preferred to daughters. Apart from it, what you find that most of the deities of Rigvedic times were women. There are a few women deities, but they are not significant or important ones. All the important deities and in fact most of the deities are in fact male deities. Also, we have no reference in the entire Rigvedic period where a woman occupied the post of a chief or a Rajan. So, they had some access to the political structure, but this access was not effective, because as far as their participation in Sabha and Vidat is concerned, it was very limited, because as we have seen, there were only four committees, and of those 4 committees, women could become member of Sabha and Vidat, but as far as the authority and control of these committees is concerned, it was completely insignificant. It was not effective at all. So, in spite of being in those committees, the women did not enjoy control over the political process or political system of the Rigvedic times. So, what you find that there is certain degree of social stratification along gender lines, and this is very clearly discernible. Now, apart from these internal divisions, there are certain references of certain other class of people within the Rigvedic period, in the Rigvedic society rather. These are referred as Dasa, Dasyu and Pani. Now, these are seen as hostile to the Aryans, because Dasas, which later refers to a slave, but as far as Rigvedic period is concerned, Dasa and Dasyu are described as rich in cattle wealth. They lived in puras, that is forts, and they are described as black complexioned, they are described as snub-nosed, they are worshippers of phallus, which is a practice that was not followed by the Aryans, and so it was considered impure by them. Though there is relationship between Aryans and Dasas, but and this relationship between Aryas and Dasas is conceived to be hostile, but there are some indications of occasional interaction and peaceful coexistence as well. For example, we have few rulers, Aryan rulers, who had Dasa as suffix in their names. For example, Sudas or Diodas, they were basically Aryan rulers, but the suffix in their name suggests some kind of interaction or intermingling or coexistence with the local population, especially with the Dasaj. Now, such connection would have resulted in definitely would have resulted in cultural interminglings, but the attitude of Aryans towards Dasyu was more hostile, because we have frequent reference in the Rigveda of Dasyu Hatya. Now, Panis, according to Rigveda, were rich in cattle, they were rich in treasure, they did not perform sacrifices, they did not follow any of the Aryan practices, they spoke a different language, and they had cultural differentiation with the Aryans. So, these conflicts between the Aryans and the non-Aryans, or the local population, is very obvious in the Rigvedic literature, because the Aryans, being white complexioned, tall, and fair, with straight hairs and sharp nose and broad shoulders and all, while the local population was short heighted, dark complexioned, curly hair, snub nose. So, they did not want to interact with the local population, and they wanted to maintain their racial purity. So, that is why there is extreme contempt for the local population, and they wanted to remain aloof, but it was not possible, and over a period of time there are indications, there are evidence that this intermingling took place. Now, conflicts were very common in the Rigvedic times, and sometimes this conflict was very complex as well, because we find a reference of a particular war in the Rigveda. It is called the Sragya Yuddha. In this battle, we have that on both the sides Aryans and non-Aryans were fighting each other. On both the sides there were Aryans, and on both the sides there were non-Aryans, and they were fighting each other. So, this evidence basically indicates that the society was, of course, as far as Aryan society is concerned, it was based on occupation. The non-Aryan society was also there in existence, but there are evidence of conflict between the Aryans and the non-Aryans as far as Rigvedic period is concerned. Now, there were various groups. Some of the groups were living peacefully with the Aryans, and there was interaction, intermingling, and co-relationship between them, but at the same time there are certain groups like Panis and the Sioux which were not intermingling with the Aryans, and the Aryans were quite hostile to them. Now, as far as this entire Rigvedic society is concerned, it presents a relative picture of an egalitarian society, as there is complete absence of the beggars and wage earners in the society. So, on the basis of absence of wage earners and beggars, it has been suggested by some scholars that it was an egalitarian society. But it is practically not possible to have an egalitarian society, because though there were no wage earners, though there were no beggars in the society, but the redistribution system contained the possibility of further socio-economic differentiation in itself, and this possibility of further socio-economic differentiation was completely realized in the later Vedic times. Now, as far as the polity of the Rigvedic period is concerned, it was based on chiefdom, like any primitive political system. It was also based on chiefdom. The chief was called Rajan, and Rajan had control over his people and not over any particular territory. The reason being the kind of economic practices that they were following, because they were basically pastoral people and they had to move from one place to another place in search of pasture. So, it was not possible for them to settle down at one place, and so they moved from one place to another place in search of pasture. So, that is why it was not possible for them to settle down at one place, and because they did not settle down at one place, so there was no control of the ruler on any particular territory. Now, as far as the post of chief is concerned, it is suggested that earlier the chief was elected and the election was based on certain qualities, for example, his quality to lead into war and come out victorious. But during Rigvedic times only we have evidence that the post of the chief became hereditary. So hereditary succession practices started during Rigvedic times only as far as the political structure is concerned. Now the king was more or less a monarchical system, and the chief or the king was all powerful, but there were certain committees which controlled the powers of the chief, and these committees are known as Sabha, Samiti, Vidath and Gana. Now as far as Sabha is concerned, Sabha was basically a committee of elders of a particular tribe. Now these elders included women as well. So Sabha constituted of elder women and elder men. Samiti, it was a committee of all adult male citizens of the tribe, and as far as Vidath and Gana is concerned, we are not sure about its composition. Now of these four committees, Samiti was the most powerful one, because the job of Sabha was only to advise the king or advise the chief, but the chief was not bound to accept the advices rendered by this Sabha. Generally he accepted because they were elders and they had more experience, and they always shared their experience, which was beneficial for the king, but the king was not bound to accept. Whereas the king was act according to the advice of the Samiti, which was a committee of all adult male citizen of the tribe. Now, why was this? Is because the king was dependent on the on his tribemen, adult men, to go into war and come out victorious. So that is why the king had this limitation, and he always accepted the advices of the Samiti. Now Vidath had a redistributory function, and we are not sure about the functioning of the Gana. But the most important functionary of Rigvedic times seems to be Purohit, because it was Purohit who was probably the chief advisor of the king. It was he who acted as a link between the masses and the king, rather Vish and the king, and he somehow legitimized the position of the king. He conveyed the wishes of the king to the masses and vice versa. So Purohit seems to be most important functionary as far as officials are and functionaries are concerned, and probably the next important functionary was the Senani, because it was a society that was warlike society. The economy was based on pastoralism, and since pastoralism could not fulfill the requirements of the society, the needs of the people, so people had to resort to loptri or loot, and in such a situation the importance of Senani increased. So Senani being the another important functionary of the Rigvedic political system. Now as far as other officials are concerned, because there was no regular taxation system, so there was no official for collection of taxes. The chief also did not have a standing army, in fact. So Senani was important functionary, but the chief did not have a standing army, because it was Vrajpati who was the officer of pastured land, he used to lead the kulap or the head of the families and the Graminis, which initially was a fighting unit and later was known as a village headman. So it was Vrajpati who headed the Kulpas and the Graminis in the wars. Vrajpati was the chief of the pastured land. Pastured land was the place where the cattle of the tribe used to graze. So he was a person who was sort of controlling the economy or the most important economic activity of the Rigvedic Aryans. So that is why it is supposed that the Vrajpati enjoyed more authority over the Kulpas and the Graminis, and that is why the Graminis and Kulpas obeyed him, and so he probably led these people, he probably summoned these people in the times of need, and he led these people into wars. Now, military functions, it seems, were also performed by tribal units, various other tribal units, because there are references of some tribal units like Vrata, Gana, Grama and Sardha. So these tribal units were there, but as far as the composition and the functioning of these tribal units is concerned, we have no more information to share with you, because the sources, as we know, sources are limited. We have only the Rig Veda on which we have to discuss all these things, and Rig Veda being primarily being a religious text, it does not have all the details related to the administration of the times. Now, Gan is another important tribal unit which was apart from being a military unit also served as a redistributory unit, and the most important redistributory unit was Vidat. So these two, Gan and Vidat, Gan acting as a military unit as well as redistributive unit, and Vidat only serving as a redistributive unit. Now, as we said, Vidat was also a committee in which women could become members, and women members in fact acted as the agents of redistribution whenever any Loktri was brought and whenever any booty was brought by the people after victory. So this is basically broader political structure. Now, if we try to draw a linear political structure, then it can be suggested that the Kula or the chief of the family, rather family was the basic social unit. It was a very large unit. So it was headed by a person called Kulap. Now these Kulaps, when several Kulaps come together, they constitute a Gram, which was headed by a Gramini, and various group of villages, when they came together, they constituted a Vis, which was under the Vispati, and when several Vis came together, they constituted the Jana or tribe, which was headed by the Rajan. So this is broader political structure, beginning with the family to the Rajan. But as we have already said, that it was basically semi-nomadic society. The life of the people was based on pastoral economy, so it was not possible for them to settle at one place, and they moved from one place to another place, and that is why we cannot see what you call an elaborate state system, because of the nature of the society, because of the nature of the economy, and because the kind of economy that they were practicing. So that's all we had to discuss as far as this topic is concerned, because we are basically discussing all the features, and this lecture I believe covers almost all the features of the economy, society and polity of the Rigvedic times. So thank you very much. That's from my side.
What you suggest about the, if a student want to know more about the society and economy, how will they, what other sources, or how they will analyze the sources?
No, as far as sources for this period are concerned, we have only one source, and that is Rig Veda. We have no other source. So we can basically, and Rig Veda is also not a history text. It is basically a religious text. It's considered to be the earliest religious text, oldest religious text in the world. So it was because of the work of the philologists and other grammarians who have helped us draw the picture of society, economy and polity, and this has been interpreted by a number of scholars. For example, scholars like Professor R.S. Sharma, Romila Thapar, they have done wonderful work on the social structure and social system of Rigvedic people. So I would like students to go through these works if they want to know more about the social structure of Rigvedic times.
Okay, only in this Rigvedic text.
Rigvedic period, yes,
Okay.
of course.
And what about the economy? Because you were telling that everything was being measured in terms of the cow. The economy was determined by the cow. How wealthy people were.
Because the life of the people was not settled.
Okay.
They moved from one place to another.
Okay.
So in such a type of lifestyle, one cannot practice agrarian economy.
Okay.
Agrarian economy is something that requires permanent settling down. Now that we see during later Vedic times.
Okay.
But during Rigvedic times, their main economic wealth were their cattle. And because they followed cattle, they practiced cattle rearing, so they moved from one place to another place in the search of pasture land.
Okay.
And
So the nomadic.
the status, the strength, rather the richness of a person was measured in terms of cattle only.
Can the society be or the economy of the time be put in a nomadic way, which we have in the previous prehistoric times? People
It was
moving-
not nomadic, it's called semi-nomadic.
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 They were transforming
They were
from.
partly settled because they settled at a place because they also practiced agriculture to very limited extent. They cultivated barley, and barley is a grain that ripens in a very less period. Now it serves as food for human being and fodder for the animal as well, so it also suited their lifestyle. But apart from barley, we do not have any other reference of any agricultural practice during Rigvedic times.
So main food is all. What was the main food? at the time?
Their main food, apart from barley, their main food was dairy product,
Okay.
the meat,
Yeah,
that
we-
meat that they obtained from the animals, cattle, sheep, etc.
okay, that we have in a reference when
Yes, yes.
a guest comes to the house, they are offering that.
Yes.
Okay. So, and the cow was the main source of.
In fact, their whole life revolved around cow.
Okay.
And this can be seen from the fact that you have so many terms in their vocabulary that is prefixed by the word go,
Okay,
go that is cow.
Right.
For example, godhuli.
We will discuss this, but before that, we take up the question from Punjab. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
हाँ जी
जी सवाल पूछिए.
ਇਹ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ ਕਿਹੜੇ ਪਾਰਟ ਚ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਜੀ? ਵੈਦਿਕ ਕਾਲ ਵੈਸੇ 3 ਪਾਰਟ ਆ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਦੇ, ਫਸਟ ਸੈਕੰਡ ਤੇ ਥਰਡ. ਫਸਟ ਤਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਚੀਨ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ,
पाश्चर लैंड. सॉरी, फिर से एक सवाल
ਮੇਨ ਵੀ
पूछिए.
ਆਪਾਂ 3 ਭਾਗਾਂ ਚ ਹਿਸਟਰੀ ਨੂੰ ਵੰਡਦੇ ਆ ਨਾ.
पंजाबी में बोल रहा हूँ.
हाँ, क्या फिर से
हाँ
पूछिए.
जी।
आपका
ਹਾਂ, ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਵੀ ਪ੍ਰਾਚੀਨ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ, ਇੱਕ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਮੱਧਕਾਲੀਨ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ, ਇੱਕ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਆਧੁਨਿਕ ਇਤਿਹਾਸ.
सॉरी, हम लोग हिंदी इंग्लिश समझ सकते हैं. आप हिंदी या इंग्लिश में अगर सवाल पूछे तो हम लोग उसका आंसर कर देंगे.
हिंदी में नंबर 1 तो प्राचीन इतिहास हो गया जी।
नंबर 1 प्राचीन
इतिहास।
ओके, प्राचीन इतिहास जी।
हाँ। नंबर 2 हो गया अभी मध्य इतिहास जी,
मध्यकालीन इतिहास, ठीक है
मध्य इतिहास। हाँ।
जी।
ते नंबर 3 हो गया भी आधुनिक इतिहास जी।
हाँ हाँ,
इन्हों चो ये केड़े च आऊ, प्राचीन च आऊ फिर वैदिक काल?
ये प्राचीन इतिहास है। प्राचीन इतिहास को अगर हम लोग देखें तो सिंधु सभ्यता से उसका स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट है, अगर जिसका रिटर्न रेफरेंस मिलता है तो सिंधु सभ्यता 2500 या 3000 बीसी पुराना उसको मानते हैं। उसके बाद ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड आता है वो, जिसको 1500 बीसी से 1000 बीसी तक मानते हैं, और 1000 बीसी से 500 बीसी या 600 बीसी तक उसको हम लोग लेटर वैदिक या उत्तर वैदिक काल बोलते हैं। उसके बाद मौर्य एम्पायर आता है, मगध साम्राज्य या मौर्य एम्पायर, जिसमें
शताब्दी ईसा पूर्व का काल है, बुद्ध का काल, उसके बाद से मौर्य काल है,
उसके जिसमें अशोक का रेफरेंस मिलता है। फिर बाद में गुप्ता पीरियड।
सवाल स्पष्ट
तो उनका जानने का है कि घटनाक्रम कैसे इवॉल्व हुआ है, जो हम लोग समझते हैं, क्योंकि वो समझना चाह रहे इतिहास कैसे निकल कर आया। तो अगर प्राचीन काल हो गया, मध्यकाल हुआ, फिर आधुनिक काल, तो प्राचीन काल को हम लोग सिंधु सभ्यता से रेफरेंस पॉइंट से भारत के संदर्भ में अगर इतिहास की बात करें तो समझने की कोशिश करते हैं, क्योंकि वो स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट है। और बीच में अगर मध्यकाल की बात करें तो उसमें 2 पीरियड आता है, एक सल्तनत काल और उसके बाद मुगल काल। और उस मुगल काल के बाद आधुनिक काल, जिसमें ब्रिटिश शासन, और उसके बाद आज़ादी के बाद। तो इस तरह से इतिहास के कालखंड हम लोग विभाजित कर सकते हैं मोटा मोटी समझने के लिए, एक आम आदमी को समझने के लिए। जहाँ जो विद्यार्थी होंगे वो तो निश्चित तौर पे इसका विशेष ज्ञान होगा और डेट भी मालूम होंगे, लेकिन एक आम आदमी अगर समझे तो इस तरह से इतिहास को समझे। तो आज हम लोगों ने चर्चा कर रहे थे ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड के, जिसे वैदिक पीरियड भी कहा जाता है ना?
नहीं, वैदिक पीरियड में ऋग्वेदिक और उत्तर वैदिक
पीरियड में दोनों आ गए। ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड मतलब पूर्व वैदिक काल और उत्तर वैदिक काल, दोनों को मिला के वैदिक पीरियड हो गया।
पूर्व वैदिक काल को ऋग्वेदिक काल भी कहा जाता है।
और जो रफली अगर 1000 साल को माने तो उसको वैदिक पीरियड कर सकते हैं। 1500 से लेके 600 ईसा पूर्व तक इसको वैदिक काल कहते हैं। और कोई सवाल हो तो पूछिए। ठीक है, हम लोग बात कर रहे थे गाय के, गो के।
हाँ, वही मैं बता रहा था कि मतलब गाय उनकी जिंदगी से इतनी गहरे रूप से जुड़ी हुई है कि उनके जिंदगी का हर पहलू जो है गायों के इर्द गिर्द घूमता हुआ दिख रहा है। जैसा कि हमने कहा कि दे वर वेरी फ्रीक्वेंट टू वर्ड्स, सो व्हेनेवर दे वेंट फॉर वर्ड्स इट वाज कॉल्ड गविष्ठी, गवेषणा।
वी हैव कॉल फ्रॉम वेस्ट बंगाल। गुड आफ्टरनून फ्रेंड, प्लीज आस्क योर क्वेश्चन।
I have a question regarding religion of this period. I want to know that which religion took place after the Vedic period?
Which
religion took place after the Vedic period?
Okay, which religion took place after the Vedic period?
Which religion?
Religion, yeah.
Religion as far as concerned, we have a pantheon of deities in the Rig Veda. Now, religion we call, there is no particular name to this religion. It's called Sanatan Dharma till the word Hindu Dharma, Hindu religion is used, because Hindu is a term that was used sometimes during 7th, 8th centuries by the Arabs. So prior to that, it's called Brahmanical religion or Sanatan Dharma.
Sanatan Dharma, yes. And in Sanatan Dharma there was a reform. We have a reference of reform in the form of Buddhism and Jainism.
That's a different story altogether.
That is. So religion was not as such which we mean today. No. It was not as such before.
No, it was definitely was not so-called Hindu religion.
Yeah, and that has come from the name of the river Sindhu, because they were not able to pronounce the word Sindhu. They said that
called Hindu.
Okay. So we have been able to. Okay, we have been able to form the concept of society or the polity of the time, your economy, on the basis of the
fundamental issues of economy, polity and society we have discussed today.
Okay.
But it's an extensive topic.
Okay, we have
so further reading of course is required.
Okay, we will also discuss which book will give you more insight and more facts after this lecture. We have a call from Uttar Pradesh. Good afternoon friend, please ask your question.
Yes, sir. My question is, what type of institution in Vedic period? Institution of marriage in Vedic period.
Okay. Was there any kind of institution prevalent in the Vedic period, and what was that?
He is talking about marriage, institution of marriage.
No, which kind of institutions were prevalent in the Vedic period?
No.
Marriage institution, talking about marriage institutions. Okay, you take.
No, if he is talking about marriage institutions, so in fact, all, there were 8 types of marriages.
Okay. Like?
Brahma, Deva, Ars, Prajapatya, Gandharva, Rakshas, Asur and Paisaj. The
8 types of marriages.
The first 4 were accepted in the society, the last 4 were not accepted in the society. No, apart from it, when the time passes on, you have references of,
that was according to
Anulom marriage, Pratilom marriage, and so on and so forth. So that was basically devised, that was a tool devised to give legitimacy to the children born out of legitimate relationship.
Okay, we have call from Odisha. Good afternoon, friend. Please ask your question.
Hello. Good afternoon,
Please ask
sir.
your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, please ask your question.
सर ये मुझे पूछना था, सर मुझे ये पूछना था कि आप सिंधु घाटी सभ्यता के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, क्या उसमें गंगा और यमुना का कुछ उससे कोई संबंध है?
पहले तो मैं बताना चाहूंगा कि आज हम लोग सिंधु घाटी सभ्यता पर बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, आज हम लोग ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड
दूसरी बात, इसका टेरिटोरियल एरिया कहाँ तक था सिंधु?
ओके, सिंधु घाटी सभ्यता पे आज हम लोग बात नहीं कर रहे हैं, आज हम लोग ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं। उसके समाज, उसमें आर्थिक स्थितियां क्या थी और उस समय पॉलिटी क्या थी। सिंधु घाटी सभ्यता पर कभी और हम लोग लेक्चर ऑर्गेनाइज करेंगे, तो उस दिन आप बात कर सकते हैं। ब्रीफली हम सर से रिक्वेस्ट करते हैं कि सिंधु घाटी के बारे में थोड़ा सा बता दें।
अगर ये सिंधु घाटी की टेरिटरी के बारे में जानकारी चाहते हैं तो वो कुछ इस तरह से है कि नॉर्थ में ये आपको जम्मू में एक जगह है मांडा।
ओके।
तो नॉर्थ में उसका लिमिट है मांडा।
ओके।
साउथ में उसका लिमिट है ये महाराष्ट्र। महाराष्ट्र में वो साइट है, मैं अभी नाम भूल रहा हूँ, भगतराव, या तो गुजरात में है।
महाराष्ट्र के आगे,
महाराष्ट्र के दायमाबाद। और पश्चिमी सीमा है इसकी, जो कि आपको फारस की खाड़ी से मिलती है। और इसकी पूर्वी सीमा धीरे धीरे बढ़ती हुई आजकल पश्चिमी उत्तर प्रदेश तक पहुंच गई है, तो मेरठ के पास तक।
सिंधु घाटी का ये ज्योग्राफिकल था, चारों पॉइंट जो नॉर्थ, साउथ, ईस्ट, वेस्ट के बारे में बात की। दिल्ली से सब दर्शक हैं, उनका सवाल लेते हैं। जी नमस्कार, सवाल पूछिए।
जी सर, मुझे ये पूछना है, जो जैन धर्म में श्वेतांबर और दिगंबर, इन दोनों का क्या सेंस है, विभाजित होने का क्या उद्देश्य था?
जैन धर्म में श्वेतांबर और दिगंबर, इस पर तो जैनिज्म पर हम लोग बात करेंगे आगे। आपको अगर वैदिक पीरियड से जुड़ी हुई कोई सवाल है, जुड़ा हुआ कोई सवाल है तो आप पूछ सकते हैं।
तो बता सकते हैं,
ऐसा बता दीजिए ब्रीफली।
श्वेतांबर और दिगंबर जो पहला विभाजन है जैन धर्म का, ये होता है आपको लगभग ये हुआ है 3री शताब्दी ईस्वी के पूर्व के आसपास। हुआ क्या कि मगध में अकाल पड़ा, मगध जो कि हब था जैनिज्म का, वहां पे अकाल पड़ा। तो उसमें अकाल में क्या हुआ कि कुछ लोग जो है वो मगध छोड़कर साउथ को माइग्रेट कर गए। श्रवण बेलगोला में जो महत्वपूर्ण मूर्ति है वो काल की ही है। तो साउथ को माइग्रेट कर गए और कुछ लोग मगध में रह गए। जो लोग मगध में रह गए उन्होंने वही प्रैक्टिस फॉलो किया जो कि एस्टेब्लिश किया था महावीर ने, कपड़े नहीं पहनने का, एक खास जीवन जीने का। जो लोग साउथ को माइग्रेट कर गए, वहाँ के मौसम के हिसाब से उन लोगों ने कपड़े वपड़े पहनने शुरू कर दिए, सफेद कपड़े। तो फिर जब विभाजन हुआ तो इशू ये हुआ कि
अब समय का
ओरिजिनल
केवल जो बाहर चले गए उसको दिगंबर बोले और जो वहां रह गए वो श्वेतांबर हो।
हाँ जी हाँ। तो बेसिकली इन्होंने ये कहा कि हमने सारी कठिनाइयों को झेलते हुए हम यहाँ रहे हैं, हम ओरिजिनल हैं। वो दिगंबर कहलाए, उन्होंने कोई कपड़ा नहीं पहना,
और जो बाहर चले गए श्वेतांबर हो। तो मित्रों, इन्हीं शब्दों के साथ आज के व्याख्यान को यहीं विराम देते हैं। कल और डॉक्टर ओपी सिंह से हम लोग बातचीत करेंगे लेटर वैदिक के बारे में, और आप प्रश्न पूछ सकते हैं। आप सबको धन्यवाद, और आपकी ओर से डॉक्टर ओपी सिंह को बहुत धन्यवाद। इन्होंने काफ़ी अच्छे तरह से और सरल भाषा में ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड के बारे में हम लोग को बताने की कोशिश की। थैंक यू वेरी मच।